been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Too many.
Okay. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
So Charlie Kirk died. What happened? Mr. Kirk was at a university in Utah where he was holding one of his great debates. His organization called Turning Point USA is a non-profit that organizes debates where students are like university campuses and colleges with the aim of perhaps converting them to right-wing financial thinking. Things like free markets, limited government, and other bright ideas that help people who are very rich get even richer. It's quite a clever plan actually, because if it works, it means the students who are just about to get into the job market would be less likely to cause a fuss if, let's say, Amazon overworks its staff or if big tech companies send their profits to tax havens. But that's just what I and other biased people have read or watched about Charlie Kirk and his organization. There are those who strongly believe that Charlie was a devout Christian, the kind who really believes in Jesus and follows his teachings and even teaches them to others. Actually, his Turning Point website has a section called TP USA Faith where you can watch videos about... Alright, here I am on the TP USA Faith website, and I'm here to find out what's their mission, vision, activation, location. Let's just do it. TP USA Faith is dedicated to empowering Christians put their faith in action. They engage, equip, and empower millions of grateful Americans who are prepared to defend their God-given rights by giving them the tools to expose lies and articulate the connection between faith and freedom. So if you're not a grateful American, this is not for you. Next, they engage with Christian leaders and members of the faith community across the nation to join in civic, social, and cultural discussions. They equip millions with the knowledge of constitutional rights ordained by God through the monthly Freedom Night in America initiative and biblical citizenship classes. Constitution and citizenship. All right. Empowering congregations through their faith groups and chapters, biblical citizenship classes, national faith tours, and faith leadership summits to help bring foundational biblical principles to their communities. Okay, here I was thinking TP USA Faith is like a America-wide Bible study or something like that, or maybe an online church. But there's constitution and civic, national faith. Well, there's some religious sounding words there, so for now let me just say he sounds Christianish. Now, this is the side that I think my fellow Kenyans had been seeing or reading about him. Several of them actually seemed quite saddened that the man had died, which, to be fair, is an expected reaction, especially when a person dies so brutally and publicly. Their mourning of him surprised me, but my surprise wasn't because of the outpour of the sadness they displayed, but that people apparently knew of him well enough to say that he'd be missed, and posting these cracked love hearts even. A certain young lady had apparently known about him since her teens, and she'd been following him very diligently all the way from over here. One of those places where Charlie Kirk's president called whole countries. You know what? The internet has been here for more than 20 years. And nowadays, if your interests and someone else's from anywhere in the world converge, if that person is constantly online, it's very likely that you'll see their content. Especially if it's someone like Charlie Kirk with a super big platform like this website and a YouTube channel with 5.6 million followers. And add to that Turning Point organization, which has 4.7 million. That's huge. So because of his platform, Kenyans for Kirk got to see and love this successful debater, yet I'm not sure they dug deep enough to really know who he was and what he stood for. And just in case they didn't, let me draw back the curtains and open a window so some fresh wind can blow over this issue, Hold on. Hi, my name is Mutizi and I'm here to talk to you, especially you, my fellow Kenyans, about Charlie. So let me start by talking about the land that Charlie Kirk was from. America. For many Kenyans, America has been the land of milk and honey. Up to some time in the mid to late 90s and maybe the early 2000s, if you had a high school certificate, maybe an ID, a passport, an I-20, and a bank statement showing a certain amount of money, you'd have a good chance to getting a visa to go to live, study and work in the US. And many people did this and they managed to go there and establish themselves and live a decent life. They were even able to send money back to their relatives regularly. And that's why I think America has remained the land of opportunity in our minds. Even musicians, when they want to start making some really big bucks, they try and get gigs in the US. And one of ours, Nonini, actually relocated over there. And it's definitely because it is so much easier to be an artist there. The infrastructure for music and concerts and things like that was set up a long time ago. So once you're in there and you're in the system, things just flow for you. It is in this land of opportunity that Mr. Kirk was born and raised in. But he wasn't just a neutral citizen. He was what is called a conservative. This means, in general, that he believed that success comes purely through personal effort and that Christian values are best, like marriage is only between men and women, etc. And that the government should tax businesses as little as possible and basically just leave them alone to do what they want. He was also part of the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again. Followers of this philosophy believe that America used to be so awesome and it was this shining example of Western civilization. It was rich and envied by everyone in the world just because of how brilliant it was and how free its people were. It was the land of opportunity where a Kenyan kid like Barack Obama could grow up to be president. Imagine that. You see, without any doubt, America was great, right? Forget about the way things are looking now, which is not very good. I mean, things are pretty bad currently. The economy is really squeezing the average citizen, and their president seems bent on making the US into one of those countries it used to bomb because they had dictators and they needed some, democracy. Those kind of places. But that's all now when Trump is in power, and we all know how he is. What about before? Like, how about in the 80s, in the 60s, in the 50s? What was it like then? So let's zero in and focus on times when America's prosperity just exploded and astonished the whole world. Like the 90s, for instance, when many in my country fled and went to seek greener pastures over there. That's when the internet became accessible to the general public. Before, it was mainly for the American military and academics at universities. It became the World Wide Web and accessible to ordinary people in 1995, leading to a boom in companies investing in the internet. A lot of organizations grew out of this boom, like independent online news outlets, tutorial sites, social media sites like MySpace, the OG of all of them, software developer communities, and of course video sharing sites like this one. Corporations like Yahoo and Google were created and expanded very fast during this period, and they and others are largely responsible for the way the internet looks and how we use it today. This great growth period was like a kind of a gold rush. Having a company that had a .com in it was seen as so revolutionary, like they were grabbing onto the next big thing. Existing companies were feeling the pressure also to get .com, which initially just meant getting a website. Nike, the shoe company, got Nike.com, Coca-Cola got Coca-Cola-company.com, and even the United Nations eventually got UN.org. Getting on the internet eventually helped companies like Nike because they were able to set up online stores where people could order their shoes. The UN was also able to have a central information hub, like to show what projects they were currently working on and list new job opportunities and stuff like that. These are all advantages, I agree. But sandwiched in between there were many companies that were just getting funded for being ideas with .coms or websites with employees. Someone would just get an idea like, how about we create a site where people can book someone to walk their dogs? And boom, walkingdoggies.com would now be a company and it would be supposedly revolutionizing the dog walking market. Whatever. Some of the ideas hadn't been thought through properly at all, and this was partly because people were just rushing to come up with whatever innovative idea so they could get funding from investors who thought even the sky wasn't the limit. So you mix together greed, shallow ideas with websites, and more greed, and what do you get? A dot-com bomb. By the time the 1990s were turning into the 2000s, majority of dot-coms had gone bust and many people lost like millions of dollars. They hadn't started making any profit, and so money to keep investing in them just eventually dried up. But a few resilient people managed to keep going and are still around today. Guys like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the good guys. So you see, it wasn't such a disaster. Anywho, that sounded a bit depressing, so let's go further back to the 1950s, America's so-called golden era. This will definitely be a good one. So the US in the 1950s was fresh out of the Second World War, which it helped end. Europe had been flattened by Hitler and it was broke from all the spending that they made on the war. So the US, which hadn't had any bombs dropped on it and was already quite industrialized, became the world's richest nation just by default. It even helped several European countries and Japan get back on their feet by hiring the best scientists and outsourcing a lot of its manufacturing to them. So America grew and its economy matured and it hired many people in the country, and then they were able to afford homes and move to the leafy suburbs and start enjoying a nice cozy life. What a country! But wait, this tremendous success wasn't available to all people. Only those who were white. Why? Because during this period of great economic growth, racism was still very entrenched in the US. Like, did you know that during the Second World War that I mentioned, it wasn't just whites who fought, but a good number of African Americans too. Yet when all the troops came home after the war, only the white soldiers were given loans to buy homes. Very cheap loans, by the way. So the white soldiers who applied for the loans ended up with a very good asset in the suburbs that they were easily able to pay off because they got jobs when the economy was good. And then they were able to use that house as collateral to get more loans if they wanted and give their children a better future by sending them to college and things like that. But African Americans and other non-whites, they just got left behind. And this is the thing, especially about black people in America, that perhaps people don't know when they harshly criticize them, especially for things like crime, violence, and so on. While their white counterparts were getting educated and buying homes, back then, black Americans' progress was being suppressed. And then, because they had little or no access to higher education, they could not get good jobs. And so, of course, many of them got angry and discouraged and finally desperate. I mean, who wouldn't? What's that? In America, you can vote. Yeah, that's true. America is the land of democracy. So if you feel you're being discriminated against, all you have to do is wait for voting day and elect a leader who cares for your well-being and all that. And before you know it, you'll have freedom and a better life. It's just simple. So why did the black guys just do that? Well, guess what? In those great 1950s, the golden era, blacks and other minorities weren't allowed to vote. So how was politics going to make their lives any better? In order for black people to finally get the right to vote later in the amazing 1960s, they and their allies really turned up the pressure on their racist government and started doing boycotts, marches, and even riots, and sometimes ridiculous things like sitting down in buses when they should have been standing up. As in, they really had to cause a serious ruckus before their government finally was like, all right, you can vote now. And you can also sit anywhere you want, and white people are no longer allowed to deny you jobs just because you're black. Happy now? This was America in its greatest era. I could talk about the period before that, during the Great War or during America's Civil War, but I can assure you that history is way worse, so I'm not getting into it in detail. What I can do is summarize America's history to this. From the time white people or Europeans landed in America, their presence has almost from the beginning been a history of them just exploiting people. They pushed the original inhabitants of America out of their lands using sophisticated techniques like lying, and eventually they just killed them. Then, because now they had this big land and couldn't cultivate it all by themselves, they had this bright idea like, hey, I heard there's some free labor for sale somewhere. And so they started importing slaves from Africa. And since free labor doesn't get paid salaries or take any leave, it's not rocket science to see how this is eventually what made America a very rich nation. I can guarantee that if in Kenya we imported millions of workers who we only had to feed and not pay a single coin, in just 50 years we'd be very far. Now imagine doing that for over 200 years. How would any nation not be great? Ladies and gentlemen, especially you Kenyans for Kirk, Charlie Kirk and his friends wanted and still want America to be great again. That which I've described is the America they long for, where investment bubbles like the .com one swell up and finally burst and leave many people jobless, where black Americans were slaves, then after being freed they had no rights and they even had to fight and die to get them, and where even after fighting in wars for America, including others I didn't mention like the Korean and Vietnam wars, they still remain significantly behind their white counterparts because the government and rich business people who collaborate with the government refuse to give them a chance to grow. And even when the blacks tried to form their own towns and live away from white people, as soon as they started to develop, white people would just find a way to bomb, burn down and destroy what they'd built. That is your great America. Charlie was assassinated, a month and a half, 2 months ago, so this is coming pretty late, but what I can say is, as you recover from mourning the loss of Charlie Kirk, by all means be sad, especially about the way he died. His family didn't really need to see him go that way. But be knowing also that this guy died working hard to restore America back to the dark days where people that looked like you were either slaves or free with no rights, and where their progress was squashed at every turn so that Charlie's ancestors could be great.